Josh with Talk About Trek. And can you believe it? We're back again to talk about Star Trek books. In this case, we're going to be talking about Star Trek The Next Generation, number 39, Rogue Saucer, by the fantastic and maybe one of my very favorite Trek authors, the wonderful John Vornholt, who I have read many, many, many books of. And just looking over here at the list, he did Masks, which I reviewed not too recently. He did Contagion. He did so much good stuff. This was actually, I believe, his 8th Star Trek book, and a very interesting book, especially following up from number 38. Rogue Saucer is I would say, one of the darker of the numbered TNG books that I have read. A lot of these are fairly lighthearted fare, and there's not kind of too much death, but this features a fair good bit of kind of almost senseless, I don't know, definitely senseless death, and kind of just sad moments because, things that didn't have to happen. And so it was a departure from Dragon's Honor, which was just so funny. While this book does have its moments, it really is more. It's more heavy on the drama of what's happening and just kind of the action of this. It's a very ship-heavy book too, which is great. So a lot of times you'll get a TNG book, which is, fully away team featured, or maybe like a split between. This is very much featured, on the ship, on the bridge, and because of the situation, also features some differences. You get the battle bridge featured a little bit, so some cool stuff there. So before we get too far ahead, let's do the normal reading of the front cover. The USS Enterprise is divided and under attack. Before we read the back, let's actually have a close look at the front cover. The art on this is so good, done by Keith Birdsong, and Keith Birdsong, of course, has done so much great Star Trek art, so many great covers, and let's actually take a closer look here. Check that out. The difference, actually, this is like the official art, and then this is like the book cover, is striking. Like, this official art is fantastic. I love this so much. The book, don't delete it. The book cover, well, very nice, just doesn't do justice to this. This is wonderful. So as you can see, and I couldn't even kind of tell exactly what was happening here. It wasn't completely clear. There was kind of something going on. But you can easily tell you got a saucer crashing down into some land here, pictured on the front cover. So just very cool art. Keith Birdsong, an awesome Trek artist, and I've loved all the work he ever did for Star Trek. So always great to see him featured, and I always want to remember to talk about the artist because, it's important to bring that up too, because that's a big part of this and just a part of the whole Trek universe, is just all this fantastic art and literature and everything that's out there. So, okay, we'll read the back. While its own saucer section receives needed repairs, the USS Enterprise tests a new experimental saucer. In theory, the new saucer can survive a planetary crash landing, but will it come through intact under genuine test conditions? Riker, Data, Worf, and LaForge risk their lives to find out, and so does Admiral Nechayev of Starfleet. But a dangerous test turns even more deadly when hostile forces seize control of the saucer and turn it against the Enterprise. Whoa, right? So yeah, it's that's not too bad of a back cover. It doesn't give away the whole story. It doesn't even tell who the hostile forces is, so that's kind of cool. But what you have here is a Maqui book. And because it is a Maqui book, for that reason, there is a lot of, I don't know, it's with the Maqui, you feel bad for them. They were pushed out of their homes, And of course, like, you learn to love the Maqui crew on Voyager, So it's kind of crazy to see. It's like you have these two sides fighting against each other, but of course, you're rooting for the Enterprise, but you feel for the Maqui as well. So just a very, very well done, I think, drama. So good action, a little bit of comedy kind of up front, some fun stuff up front, but then it does really get heavier towards the end, and leads to a conclusion that is, I mean, it's not even, I would say, like, necessarily a super happy ending, right? It's just, it's what had to happen. So, very fun. John Vornholt, he knows how to write a Trek book. So, Rogue Saucer is great. Pick it up and read it, and enjoy it, and just prepare yourself for, something a little bit darker. You're looking at, the Maqui displacement, the Cardassians. It's some of that kind of stuff. So we'll put the book down now so I don't keep waving it around everywhere like a crazy person. And we'll talk a little bit more about his influences for this book, which I thought was awesome because I didn't know until after I was done, of course. And after you're done, when you read the book, you have to read the book that's about books. This is the book about books, and it tells you about Star Trek books. So, and from that, I was able to find out that he was inspired by this, as he was also inspired by to do another book called Antimatter, which I have to look up. I don't know what that is. I have to look that up, and I will. But he was inspired by the wonderful and fantastic technical manual. And this here is my original technical manual from back in the 90s. One of the, 4 or 5 things that kind of survived through everything, and made it to today. That is not like a new thing I picked up. So, but he was inspired by this, particularly by these sections that talk about saucer separation and emergency landing of the saucer module. And look at this illustration. This is so cool. Look at this. And this is so long before generations and stuff too. So I thought that was awesome, and I think that this is awesome. And this just actually deserves a look and a whole video all on its own. And I remember spending time as a kid reading through this and having fun, just kind of flicking through and learning about these different things, that they had. But I think it deserves a full look. So that might be something I have to visit in the future. But technical manual. I love it. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Let's talk about Rogue Saucer, actually. But first, I'm very interested to look up what was the book that also was inspired by this, which was called Antimatter, which I'm not familiar with. So we're going to just quickly search it here. And of course, that's not going to work. But we're going to look into that later. If I try to search it here, I'll mess something up. But, I could look it up in that. We're getting distracted. So anyway, we've done with the early part of the video. Now we're into the late, ranting, very distracted part of the video, where I'm going to talk about the things in the book that I liked, and the kind of major plot points that went down. I won't be able to get everything. I didn't take the greatest notes, but honestly, I finished the book, and then I wrote down a fairly beefy section of notes, so I'm pretty happy with that. It was all fairly fresh in my mind because it was one of those reads where it was big chunks at a time, so it's easy to stick with you. But the book starts out with the Enterprise patrolling the DMZ, the Cardassian Demilitarized Zone. So of course they've got like a treaty with the Cardassians, and the people there that were kicked out of their homes are rebelling against that. Those are the Maqui. Of course, in the Maqui are famous as the crew from Voyager, or the half of the crew from Voyager. But the Maqui enact this fantastic plan, and it works. And when the Enterprise goes to scan this kind of random pack led vessel going into the zone, they are hit with this kind of reverse pulse, which closes down or kind of shuts down their entire saucer section computer system. They're able to separate and contain it from the rest of the ship, but effectively the saucer section is shut down. They can't command the ship from there at all. The pack led vessel is able to get away, and for all intents and purposes, the mission was a success for these Maqui. The Enterprise is basically disabled without the saucer section. They have to go to the battle bridge, which is another cool part of this book, is you get to just feature a little bit of the battle bridge and all that. But the nearest starbase, or the best starbase for them to check into, is going to be Starbase 211. And they're actually kind of excited for this opportunity because the crew needs some R&R. So they're thinking, well, we can have a little bit of downtime. Starbase 211 is famed for their museums and their shows and just all sorts of fun things that people can do there in space. So they're looking forward to a little downtime and to just kind of relax while the Enterprise gets fixed up. So it starts out on a very kind of loose note, and you have these very fun scenes of all the different crew members and the things that they're going to the station to do to have fun, and that's kind of like the main the light-hearted part of the book, and it turns fairly quickly when they are or Picard is confronted by Admiral Nechayev, who first off is not happy with him being, I guess, tricked by the Maqui and getting that happen to him, and also is just kind of a general hard ass basically. And she's been featured in a few episodes before, so you can look her up and see. But she's a very interesting character, and again, just a very rough, hard character, but someone that demands a lot of respect. And she has a new aide, and this aide is named Henry Fulton. And Henry Fulton and her have a plan to test a new saucer. And this new saucer section is supposed to be able to emergency land on a planet, but then get recovered as well. Be able to take off and then get tractored and be recovered as well. Look at that. Look at that. See, that's the emergency landing right there. Anyway, but that's the idea. So she enlists Captain Picard to kind of get a skeleton crew of people together, and it basically ruins everybody's R&R. Everybody had fun plans to do, but Captain Picard wraps up, Geordi, Worf, Riker, Data, and he lets Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy keep their R&R, and then they all go off with a few other crew members. I think something like just 14 in total. And that's the thing in this book that I thought was the silliest thing. It's why on earth would they plan this mission, this very somewhat valuable mission, with a skeleton crew? Why not have a little bit more crew for something so seemingly important? And I guess it's kind of revealed later on why. But anyway, they go off to go into the mission, and as soon as basically the whole thing starts, it goes wrong right from the get-go. And it was a double cross. It was a setup. The Admiral's aide, Henry Fulton, is a Maqui. So as soon as they're clear of the starbase and kind of far away, he detonates some kind of He detonates some kind of a concussion grenade on the bridge, knocks everybody out. The Maqui move in and take over the saucer section, which is at this point already separated from the hull section. They've kind of began their major test. Oh, one thing I didn't bring up though was part of the test was a computer simulation, where basically that was the whole reason. So they were going to simulate this battle with the Borg, where they would have to separate and then see if they could work through the battle. However, the simulation was set up by the Maqui trader, and in order for the star drive section to basically defeat the simulation, they had to use some tricky thinking, which was really well done by Mr. Worf, who flies a shuttlecraft outside of the hull section, disconnects it from the simulation basically, but then flies it into the Borg ship simulation and kind of blows it up. So it's an interesting kind of way to get them out of the computer simulation, which was supposed to keep them caught up for a while, and get them back searching for the lost saucer section. Now the saucer section has moved into a nearby gaseous nebula. I swear to God, every book has some kind of nearby gaseous nebula that you can go hide in. So it's just a thing on Trek. You have to have a gaseous nebula. So they go to the gaseous nebula, and the saucer's hiding out in there. But things are not going great for the Maqui crew. They First off, they have everybody tied up, and that kind of seems like the right thing to do. So Riker, Geordi, and Admiral Nechayev are the ones who are there on the saucer, who are doing the mission. They have them all trussed up and tied up. When Riker convinces one of the kind of nicer Maqui to untie them and just put them in the captain's ready room so that they can, at least they don't have to be tied up, you know. So, of course, as soon as they get in there, they mount an escape where they're able to kick a hole through the wall somehow or another. Geordi figures out, like, the best place to kick. They kick it, Geordi escapes and is able to get through and get into Jeffrey's tube, and you have a nicely written, fun little escape scene where he's kind of going through the tubes, dodging fire and stuff. Man, I'm going to have to keep this concise or it's going to get too crazy. But Geordi escapes, basically, and is now on this empty ship. And it was like a prototype, so there's nothing installed. They have basically like the bridge installed, and everything else is just empty halls, empty rooms, nothing in them. Not even chairs, no furniture, nothing at all. So he's on this completely empty ship, and he has to kind of figure out what to do from there. And he figures out a plan, basically, and he beams Riker off of the bridge. He's not able to get the Admiral in time, but he gets Riker off the bridge, and that's when the Maqui then enact their plan. They kind of shut down the life support everywhere but the bridge. So now Riker and Geordi, they've got to run around. They've got to figure out what life support room to go to. So they split up, and they see. I can't tell it all. There's too much. But there's some interesting scenes there. There's some nice, fun little fight scenes as well between Riker and the Maqui. And then Geordi, of course, doing some outwitting and doing some wonderful engineering to get away. And a kind of a creepy scene in a turbo lift as well that was kind of crazy. But suffice it to say, they're able to restore life support to the ship so that they're not suffocated. And it just seems that for the Maqui here, everything is kind of going wrong. And they just can't get anything right. The other weird part about this book that doesn't really play into the story too much at all is Ro Laren is a character here. Her character is known as the Architect, and she's the one that came up with this whole plan in the first place. So every now and then the book will cut back to her in the Maqui resistance, which is kind of taken up headquarters in a ruined, destroyed city, and where she's kind of planning this out, and she meets up and kind of befriends this young Maqui named Tim Wiley, who ends up being one of the crew that commandeers the saucer. Now, all of the people on the saucer, and this is important, don't call each other by their real names. None of the Maqui do, apparently, so that if they get captured by the Cardassians and tortured, that they can't give up somebody's name. So nobody knows their real name. There's Bluebird and there's Peacock and a couple of other guys, but that's not important. Suffice it, you just need to know that they call themselves by code names there. So let me just check my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, I am missing that at Starbase 211 they have a wonderful character named Captain Slarn. He's the captain of the whole Starbase, basically. A Vulcan character who's just very well done and very fun character. And like I said, that's kind of like the fun part of the book. Now the book is getting darker. So there's a Maqui, a young woman, who isn't exactly happy with the current plan of the Maqui leadership. And the leadership, too, is divided as well. They can't really decide who's in charge. And that's one of the reasons why they're just so terrible at getting this mission completed, right? But they kind of realize that they're out of luck. They don't have much they can do. The original plan was to have the hull section, the star drive section, rehook up with them, and then they would trick them and then commandeer the whole ship. However, with Riker and Geordi on the loose, they threw a wrench into that plan, and now they don't know what to do. They're basically facing annihilation. Another very cool scene, too, is they tried to trick the star drive section again by putting Admiral Nechayev on the screen and showing her all beat up and saying, and then having the traitor Henry Fulton say, "Hurry, hurry, she's badly hurt and you need to dock with us right away." And it very nearly works. They very nearly drop their shields. But Admiral Nechayev says, "Picard, I'm giving you an order, and I demand that you destroy this vessel right now with all hands on, all hands." So she's given the order for her to be killed so that the Maqui can't get away with the ship or whatever. So that was very cool as well. So she was a very well done character in this too. They are able to. It's at this point where they're kind of the last hope of the Maqui after they've gotten away is to land on the closest M-class planet and hopefully try to vanish so they just don't get arrested or caught by the Cardassians. So they find one that is a pre-warp civilization, and of course the Prime Directive is in effect. This young Maqui, who I think was ex-Starfleet, doesn't want to go against it. So they order her to instead go down and search for Riker and Geordi. Because she doesn't want to violate the Prime Directive, she thinks it's wrong. She gets sent on a search mission. And she gets into the turbo lift and she goes down to the lower level. And as soon as she opens the door, she runs right into Riker and Geordi. And she manages to shoot first, and she gets a shot off on Riker, but only hits him in the shoulder. Riker is able to throw his stolen disruptor back. Geordi catches it and shoots her and kills her because they're Klingon disruptors. There's no stun setting. So, again, very dark. And it's at this point in the book where I realize, wow, they're doing some things here. He's doing some things here that are just, I guess, I don't know, trying to really make you feel for these different factions, for these characters. And that was one of the spots, too, where I felt it because she was kind of trying to do the right thing, but then she got gunned down. And there was really nothing that anyone could do, So, I'm missing some things, I believe. But we're getting close to the conclusion. You know that they are heading towards this Iron Age planet. The Enterprise can't catch up with them yet. They're having some trouble. They were actually pretty badly damaged in the initial battle. The good news is that the initial saucer, the real saucer, has been repaired. And Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy and a small crew are now piloting that out from Starbase 211 and heading in their direction so the Enterprise can be whole again. So, and there's actually an interesting part, too, where, both of the saucers are there at once, and Picard has to figure out what to do, and he just fires at both, figuring that the one that fired back, of course, would be the duplicate saucer, and that was the case. So, but anyway, the Enterprise is able to return itself to whole. The saucer section begins its crash landing into this culture. There's kind of nothing they can do at this point, nothing that Geordi and Riker can do to stop it. So they do figure a way onto the bridge where Riker basically says, I'm the best suited to fly this thing down, let me do it, and they all kind of agree. In the midst of everything, there's a lot of, I think, turbulence and things like that. People get thrown up and down, so a lot of the crew is kind of knocked about and knocked unconscious, but they're able to get into the planet's atmosphere and get down and land, but they direct it or Riker directs it away from land and towards the ocean so that they'll just sink and not, develop or influence the developing culture at all. So that's the idea, basically. But the Maqui crew and Geordi are able to beam off to a local island. So you have an interesting scene there at the end, kind of a creepy scene where Riker is escaping the sinking saucer. And of course, as soon as it's hit the ocean, sea monsters. Sea monsters coming everywhere. So you got Riker fighting off sea monsters in the sinking saucer. They think basically the Admiral Nechayev is dead inside of it. They were able to rescue her from the Maqui earlier in the book and kind of bring her out to a different section of the ship. And again, Geordi has been beamed to the shore, the closest shore, with the remaining survivors of the Maqui. But when they beam to the shore, they realize that it's not sand, but like this thick mud. So they're all kind of stuck in this mud. It takes a while to get out. As soon as they do get out, Geordi takes off from the Maqui into the woods. When you have the next kind of dark part of this book, where when Geordi's in the woods, he comes across a troop of Cardassian soldiers that have arrived on the planet searching for the Maqui. So it's at this point when he sees that they're heading towards the Maqui, who are still kind of screaming loudly and stuck in the mud. And Geordi tries to warn them of what's happening, and he does yell to warn them, but it's too late. But it does give them time to at least fight back and not just be killed without a chance to fight back. And they're able to kill a lot of the Cardassians there. There's a few Cardassians left who are able to capture the one remaining Maqui member and transport him away. And who is it but the traitor Henry Fulton? So again, just a very dark ending there too. All the Maqui die. The traitor gets taken away by the Cardassians to experience terrible torture. Geordi's left to vaporize the bodies there in the mud so that they'll influence the culture or anything. The Enterprise arrives, beams up Riker at the very last moment, so he's kind of clinging on to the top of the saucer as it sinks. And they're able to also find the Admiral and beam her up as well. And she was trapped in the kind of like the monitor room for the shuttle bay, and she had sealed it up, and she was stuck in there and watching the thing get flooded and filled with sea monsters. So she was kind of freaking out as well. So and then they close up the book with a kind of like a little bit of a look in at the traitor Henry Fulton being taken by the Cardassians and tortured. And it's at this point they reveal why it's so important that you don't tell them your real name. And they all go by code names, because if this guy, Fulton, knew Bluebird's real name or whatever, he would have surely given it up, and then Bluebird's family, friends, or whoever would have been hunted down and killed by the Cardassians. So that was an interesting, that was like the end too. Very dark end. Things work out fine for the Enterprise, and the Riker, Geordi, and them all get commendations. Ro, her cell there on this kind of planet is found out because of the success of this mission and the kind of the success of everything she's doing. So she has to leave. The whole place is bombarded. So even her story is kind of dark as well too, where the mission is a failure. All the crew that was sent to do it is lost, and now they just have to kind of move on to the next mission. So again, just it's a very dark, very different book, but so good. Just such a good look at just interesting things, interesting technical things about the Enterprise, interesting things about the Maqui, and just a kind of fun look too. And maybe like, I guess I would give Riker the star here. Picard really, he did some things, but I think Riker's action on the saucer section would give him the starring role here. So, oh, that was good. 28 minutes and 29 minutes of talk about Rogue Saucer, which leaves us 1 minute to talk about what's next. And what do you think's next? Because it's really hard to stop on 39. At least it is for me. So I am going to go ahead and read 40. Possession. I've never looked at this before. Oh, we've got a Ferengi, Worf, Troy story. Possibly. You really can't trust the covers. Cool looking cover though. Troy looks fraying. Look at that. Anyway, that's going to be what's next. After 40, we're going to take a little bit of a Trek break. I say a little bit of a Trek break, but it's going to be kind of a thick Trek break. And we're going to read through 650 odd some odd pages of withered and glass before we jump back in to the awesome looking, I know nothing about it and I don't want to, but there's a crossover series called Invasion that features, I don't know, Voyager, Next Generation, TOS, and DS9. That's coming. That is coming soon. So much fun stuff coming, and stay tuned for all that. Okay, we're going to end it right there, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, live long and prosper, and we will see you all in the next video. Have a good night. Goodbye.